Okay, I'll begin the day's update here to kind of do a quick recap of the situation, and then we'll look at maybe some strategic ideas going forward. Okay, it looks like at the moment the situation is trending fairly bad. I mean, Biden is now currently taking the lead in Georgia by a small amount. However, there are military ballots that haven't been counted yet, and I think a few others. There's also some ballots from Gwinnett County, which probably won't be very helpful to Trump either on balance. But military ballots hopefully will be helpful. So we're probably being right at the margin of a Biden victory, but they'll be clearly in what I call recount territory. I mean, very legitimate recount issues. And there's always the ongoing question of various voter irregularities and fraud. And so I think that probably Georgia's ripe for a recount. Okay. Nevada hasn't come in yet, and of course that will let Fox News declare Biden the winner if Biden happens to win that. However, that one has a lot of issues that could be addressed. There's a question of apparently has been raised about a tremendous number of people who voted who are no longer residents of the state. Now, I'm not sure how excited I want to be about that. I want to hear more about it. Let's put it that way. It's possible. It takes a lot of detective work to even begin to turn over election based on rejecting fraud. So it's very difficult. But we'll see what happens on that one. Arizona is still being counted, and the Republicans in general and Trump in specific still believe that they can win that one as votes come in. And it doesn't, on the numbers on the chart don't look too good, but they claim that a lot of the outstanding votes have a preference in their direction, and they did get a bunch in the other day that had a 52 to 48 preference in a generally Democrat-leaning county. So that's an ongoing situation. However, the really bad news is what's happening in Pennsylvania. Be a realist here. Given the number of outstanding ballots and the skew that the absentee ballots are going 3-1 in favor of Biden because of the fact that the Democrats emphasized voting from home rather than voting in person. I think we can be pretty well assured of how that will pan out, that Biden will take Pennsylvania. And I think even if you take the numbers that, like what Fox is putting up with 264, take 11 out for Arizona, flipping back to Trump, that'd be 253. Give Biden Pennsylvania, and he's got it without even worrying about the other states, right? If that were to pan out, Trump probably will still hopefully win North Carolina. However, they're sitting on their vote for some strange reason. Why aren't they counting? I don't know. The court gave them more time, and apparently they've decided to take it. I think there's a theory out there that they're playing kind of a media game, but with the Democrat-controlled election officials deciding which states to advance forward and which ones to hold back in order to create the media perception of a Biden victory is already in the bag, and then that hopefully psychologically influences the courts to rule against Trump when he makes various appeals and try to solidify their control that way. It's a mixture of psychology with actual numbers. So that's one thing to look for. On the other hand, Trump is challenging several races in Pennsylvania, the situation in Georgia, probably to a lesser extent there, because he could conceivably win that one, particularly in a recount. He's called for a recount in Wisconsin. I think that Michigan's really out of recount range, really. I think it's too far away. And their laws are more strict on that there. So, and then you have the Nevada situation with the potential idea of people who are voting out of state. Remember, that was the one where was a perfect example of mass mail-out ballots to every registered voter. And who knows who got a hold of them and who voted them. So the potential for fraud in this election is pretty high. And don't forget the fact that Joe Biden actually said that he had the best voter fraud organization in any campaign. So did he misspeak? That's a pretty strange thing to say, you know. And I don't know why you would have an organization trying to prevent voter fraud, because the Republicans really don't engage in much of it. Almost all the voter fraud's from the Democrat side, and it's all well known. And I said that without evidence, as all the Democrats will keep pointing out. I don't need evidence. I know the facts here. It's reality. And so, and given the general alignment more and more with the Democrats with various radical and criminal elements in the country, such as Antifa and so forth, it's obvious. So, generally speaking, Republicans have to win elections by margins in some states in order to actually get a fair count. Okay, so we kind of know where the established process with all of its biases is going to. The question is, what does Trump do? And that's going to be kind of interesting, because if Trump was an ordinary Republican, if he was a Bush, you know, a Nixon, he would probably at some point magnanimously decide that, well, I lost, and congratulations, Joe, have fun with it. I tend to think that Trump won't do that. Maybe that's why some people out there were opposing Trump all this time. I suspect Trump will continue to create as much mayhem as possible in that scenario. And that has both good and bad aspects to it. I'm going to say first off, I am incredibly disappointed at what's happened here. I suppose I'm not looking at like it as much as some people, and I could rant and rave at the screen here, but you know, the fact of the matter is, I think this is a big loss for the country. Not because Trump himself is the greatest personality, but the program he was putting in place, I think, was good for our economy and it was shoring up our borders. It was it did some crime reform, which alleviates some of the press on certain minority communities. He was actually bringing together a coalition of people based most on their own values rather than on a variety of prejudices that the Democrat Party continues to promote. So I think that a real chance for a better America will be lost if Trump actually ends up losing the presidency here. And it's a really sad thing. And of course, we can get into the whole thing of what woulda, coulda, shoulda, how Trump should have done this or that. But the thing that ultimately defeated him, I think, was the COVID pandemic and its consequences on the economy, on the decisions that one would have to make. Any way you look at it, I think if COVID hadn't have happened, I think Trump would have easily been able to beat Joe Biden by a reasonable margin. But I think that gave the Democrats the opportunity to change election rules and make all kinds of decisions, and this mass mail-out ballot thing, and encouraging a lot of absentee balloting that might not have been the case otherwise. And you know, the absentee ballots always have a degree of fraud proneness in them anyhow. You don't know for sure. So it depends on the state. There are states that actually require witnesses or even notary. I think at one time, last time I voted, and the only time I ever voted absentee in my life was the first time I ever voted. At that time, way back years ago, they actually required a notary in the state I was in at the time. So, which I thought was, made it fairly secure. I had to show ID and get notarized at a bank. So, but anyway, point is that I just want to say to the Trump people out there that if I sound too analytical, I am really pretty hurt by this too. But reality is reality, and we have to face what we're facing here. Now, the good news is that I think that Tillis probably will squeak out his election in North Carolina. Will win, I think, Alaska, and that will put us in range to have 50 votes in the Senate. Now, the bad news on Georgia is, and this is why a recount is still worth doing, if we could possibly get Purdue up to above 50% by a hair in the final certified count, then we would have to face a runoff, and that would mean we would be guaranteed 51 senators. And that would mean the Democrats wouldn't have the majority, and all those evil things they're proposing, which I've been railing about in all these videos going back to the beginning of them on politics, would not be possible. It's unclear with a 50-50 with Kamala Harris breaking the tie. Would they be able to go that radical? I'm sure she'd break the tie. That's not the question. The question is, would every Democrat sign up for that with that slim of a majority to go that radical? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. It's a chance, again, not worth taking. So everybody needs to focus on supporting the two candidates in the runoff in Georgia. If we can win those 2 seats, we'd have 52 senators then, I think, and that would definitely secure a defensive position. So that's the case on that. In the meantime, I think Trump will, I suspect, continue to fight this thing. He will continue to charge. Look, there has been a bunch of fraud on the part of the Democrats. That's a certainty. The only question is, was it decisive? That's the legitimate question that anybody on the other side can raise. Now, they'll raise and say it didn't even happen. It's all been debunked, but it did happen. But the question is, was it decisive? And that is the real issue, I guess, on that sense. The other question is, even if it is decisive, can we prove it in a court of law? And that's another issue. So, at any rate, that's the way I see it. So I think Trump will go forward. I think where he's in line for recounts, if we do end up losing Georgia, and I'm not sure about that. We might squeak out a 50-vote win there or a 100-vote win. You don't know with the military ballots coming in, overseas ballots. I mean, overseas can be 2 types of people. The liberal see the world group, and it could be just business people or somebody overseas. It's hard to know. It could be people in the oil industry. I mean, I don't know who they are. And so that we'll have to just wait till the final count occurs. But I think we'll be in recount range if we don't win it. And I don't know that Biden would want to recount it because I don't think he'll need it. But, that's one I think that'll be recounted if it doesn't turn out favorable for Trump. And of course, he's already said Wisconsin, and I think Pennsylvania. I think that's where all these irregularities. The Democrats were cute by 2 parts. I think by not letting the Republican observers in. If they'd gave them full access and not obstructed them in any way, it's probably true, depending on the facts. Well, maybe they wouldn't have a leg to stand on, but since they did, we can presume that they were cheating. Otherwise, why don't they want to see what they're doing? I mean, if you're being upfront, wouldn't you want people to see that you were being upfront? I mean, I would think so. So if you're cheating, you definitely wouldn't want them to see you're cheating. And so I think that that's a case that needs to be made, and I think we need to demand a complete recount of the vote in Pennsylvania, and we need to bring in outside people to monitor it. This needs to be carefully monitored because we just can't trust what's going on in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and so forth. It's not worthy of trust. And I think that's the position I think we need to take on this. And in fact, in a way, I think fighting the outcome is worth fighting just to try to dredge up the real truth about the fraudulent behavior that we can. It seems to me like we should bring in the FBI and start interrogating people too, and see if we can get people under the False Statement Act isn't technically oath, but it still could put you in jail for the same amount of time. To fess up to what they've seen. If they didn't do it, did they see anybody else altering ballots, throwing away ballots, changing ballots? I mean, we really need to find out on this because the fact of the matter is that if you let them get by with it this time, they're definitely going to do even more next time. And I think that's something that needs to be pursued. I don't know. The question is, will the courts give us the latitude to do it? And that I have no idea. I mean, the Supreme Court isn't the same one that ruled in favor of what they were doing in Pennsylvania before. We have one more justice on there. We have no idea what she'll do. She's new. She may not want to be the nail that's sticking out, so to speak, or she might be. I don't know. We'll find out about that. But I mean, we might as well give it a try and fight this thing until the final court decision says you got to stop. Now, the other thing I would say is that this fits into the only strategy I really see truly for a Trump win, barring some miraculous discovery if we found our own missing ballot boxes, which I don't think so. That would be the what I call in my last video the mad dog strategy, which is to keep the fight up. Keep Biden from getting 270 votes certified. past the deadline for the electors to vote and literally drive it into Congress, where I think the majority, even if we had 50 senators in the Senate side, and if we had the House like it looks like it's shaping up with more representatives we had before, we should be able to have a majority of state delegations. And the way that's counted, remember, 1 vote for California, 1 vote for Montana, 1 vote for Texas, 1 vote for Alaska, 1 vote for Pennsylvania, 1 vote for New York. You get the picture. With that situation, and any time it ties in a state, the state effectively can abstain, because if you have an even tie among the delegation, it doesn't vote. Given that situation, Trump should be able to win the presidency, and even with a 50-50, remember, Pence will still be vice president when that occurs. He would then cast a deciding vote for himself. So that would put Trump-Pence back in office. And that's in a pretty, that's almost a conservative scenario, even if a disaster were to strike in Georgia on the runoffs, okay. So, but the question is, would the Supreme Court let that happen? Or will they simply rule at some point before the deadline, this recounting and these objections just have to stop, sort of like they did in the 2000 election, which basically, ended that one. In that case, the actual count really was in favor of Bush by a little over 500 votes. And I think afterwards, during the Sunshine Law, a lot of reporters looked at all the ballots. They went through the whole thing in detail, and they never really came up with a scenario where it didn't turn out that way, I believe. So it was legitimate, but they put a stop to counting, and the Supreme Court may do the same thing this time with the opposite effect from a partisan point of view. Or they may not. If they let it go the full way, then it really could go to Congress, and that could be a way to pull this out, although I think there's going to be a lot of angry people if that really were to happen. And there may be another question, would the Republicans in the House side have the guts to really do it? Well, maybe they're angry after Pelosi after these years and would. I don't know. But I just throw that out to you that this is the lay of the land. There is one other scenario being talked about, which would be for the state legislatures and states, where the Republicans have the legislatures, to vote for the Trump electors rather than the Biden electors and override the actual popular vote. I think Mark Levin is advocating that. Let's be blunt, that's not going to happen. Politically, it would be suicide for them in that state, I think, to do that, I believe. And I just don't think they're going to do that. They might, but I don't. I just somehow can't see that happening on the situation. The House would be different, because if it gets thrown into the House, then it literally is the House's responsibility to vote. Whereas they would have no choice to vote. The other choice would be for the Republican delegations to vote for Biden. That would be their choice. Or they could vote for the Libertarian. I believe the Constitution says the top 3. Well, yeah. Point is, so there they would have no choice but to vote one way or the other, where there is a choice in the state legislatures, which is to do nothing, which is sort of the safe thing to do. Nothing. So, at any rate, I think that kind of sums up what I think right now, and I'm very disappointed again at what I'm seeing right now, and I guess we could always hope for a miracle to show up with some missing ballots, but I've been following it pretty carefully and doing some calculations, and I think we might still potentially win Arizona, but if Biden were to win Pennsylvania, I believe that would so solve the issue. So let's okay. Well, that's all for now. If you like these videos, give me a like. Any comments you have, if you disagree with me, let me know. I'd be interested in what you think. Of course, if you're on YouTube and have a channel, account there, subscribe. After the election, I'll probably be talking about a variety of other things. I guess got focused on the election because it was what was on my mind predominantly during this thing. And there's also a lot of political strategy things that's going forward too. Very important, those 2 runoffs that's going to happen, or probably going to happen in Georgia. I guess there's some miracle might put Purdue back in the winner above 50, but on the other hand, I think there's a good chance of winning those 2 too, although I wouldn't count in the bag. There's going to be a lot of money going into that race. So anyway, so all for now, and Until next time.